Brian, what's happening, man?
Living the dream, my man. Living the dream, my man. We're
Living the dream.
You know, another day in paradise, and that's what everything's about when we're on Sales Chatter Live, especially for Data Day. Excited to be here, excited for amazing guests, and excited to spend this next hour of talking about Hank the Tank. Is that what we're doing today, or we're talking? I don't know.
We got a little TRABB, we got a little WHE, we got a little DOTR, and we're not broadcasting to Facebook today because they didn't like my title. So we're going to say screw them today, buddy, because that's just what it is. But yeah, I figured I'd go a little interesting. You know, I guess we will mention Hank the Tank because I guess it's a pretty big situation going on there. But Data Day. We got some pretty cool things to talk about today, and I didn't want to give it away in the titles. That's why I used the.
Yeah, I thought you had like an aneurysm, like writing this. I was gonna be like, you know, this is like hooked on phonics, but I was like, I'm excited, you know, trap door. I was like, is this a trap door? You know, like I don't know what's going on, so I'm excited, my man.
They say headlines should cause curiosity. Was there? Could it get any more curious? And what the heck is Deigan talking about when he put this together? But you know what? We have got Dean the man with us, and we got Jeff with us, and I gotta say. I'm super jealous, Jeff, because I saw you combing your mustache off when we were offline. And brother, I haven't even combed my hair in like 10 years. And I'm watching you comb your mustache and I'm like, geez, I'm jealous. I wish I could do something like that to use a comb again. But I tell you, you and Ryan, Dean, you and me, we come out of the shower. It's like this. Bang, my hair's dry. Good to go. Let's go. Let's move on.
The cowboy and I, we were late. You know, when him and I were just doing the Sales Chatter alone, off air, we used to talk about like our regimen, our health care, our hair care, our skin care. You know, we've got a beauty line coming up, the Bodacious Monk line of skincare. You know,
Bodacious Monk line of skincare.
There we go. You know, that's what we always
put hair on your chest, folks.
Yeah, there we go.
I don't need any more, thanks.
Yeah. Or are you one of the guys when you take your shirt off, you're wearing a sweater vest?
Yeah.
Is that you? Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah.
I mean, come on now. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, well, I get it. I get it. Diener, what is TRABB?
TRABB? Is that the Truckers Restroom Bill Act?
Yes, sir. Way to go, brother.
What the heck?
What? Say that again.
Yeah,
the Truckers
TRABB.
Yeah, what is it's the Truckers Restroom Accessibility Act? What
bipartisan bill.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
What?
All right.
Dean, you are the man. Okay, so Dean, what is WHE?
Oh, gosh, I didn't get home till 2 a.m. It's way too early for these questions.
Warehouse is empty.
Warehouse is empty. Yeah.
So, right. Where do you want to start?
What is DOTR?
What's that?
What is DOTR?
Hang on, I'll look at my text.
I didn't get one.
Yeah, me too. I'm out of the memo, man. I thought we were talking about Hank the Tank today. You know?
It's Sunday, Friday. I mean, Jesus, come on.
These are on the rise, boys.
It's Hell Day Wednesday. Jesus.
Diesel on the rise, man.
So now that we got all the curiosity out of the way, Dean, talk to us, buddy.
Let's go.
Truckers Restroom.
Yeah, so on our show yesterday, we had Ibrahim Bayan. I used to work with him when he was at Freightways, chief economist. And he works at Nuveen, who are a commercial warehouse consulting firm of sorts. But he's a really good truckload economist. And we had him on the show. We had him on every quarter talking about the warehouse market because I'd seen a story that talked about how warehouse occupancy rate or vacancy rates, my apologies, had started to increase. And the headline was that, cast your mind back to 18 months ago when all of these imports were pouring into the country and they were filling up all these warehouses in some of the land, I won't say landlocked, but parts of the country where there's not a lot of land and pretty tight building regulations in California. The Inland Empire in the Ontario freight market is one in particular, just outside of Los Angeles or part of Los Angeles. And those warehouses filled rapidly with all of the imports that were surging in from overseas. The spillover effect was a lot of that truckload volume found its way to Stockton, north of San Francisco, which is another massive warehouse market. And then when they filled up, what we started to see was a lot of volume move to Phoenix, and then to Denver, and then to Dallas to find warehouse space that was being built as fast as the imports could come in. And we hypothesized on this show that at what point do we have enough warehouses or too many? And it's kind of, I was out in Salt Lake City yesterday driving around, and there's a massive development as you go west of the city. There were 5 brand new warehouses, probably 100 dock door size, all identical, same design, same architecture, empty, right? So built, waiting for someone to fill them. The more telling data point was in Reno, or in Sparks, Nevada. I was driving around the Sparks manufacturing area where a lot of truckload volume gets sort of moved in and out. And there was a massive cold store. And you can tell a cold store by the black rubber around the doors, right, to seal the temperatures. And what struck me was this was one had about 80 dock doors down each side, but there wasn't a truck in sight. The entire footprint of the warehouse was filled with cables, massive cables of wire, copper, plastic, cables of any size. I mean, every square foot of concrete was filled with cables, which would be flatbed drop deck type freight, not refrigerated freight, which I thought was an interesting use of space. So on the show yesterday, Ibrahim said that, and again, I thought this was, a pretty big deal. He kind of said it wasn't so much of a big deal because even though the Inland Empire occupant or vacancy rates have doubled, almost doubled from, they were 1.2% vacancy rate a year ago, they're now 3.8%. That's still below the national average of 4.8. And he said, and I said, so what? So my question to him was, are the vacancy rates doubling in Inland Empire, California, indicative of the rest of the market? And he said, not really. So what he said was vacancy rates are still under 5% for commercial warehousing. And it's not until they really get to about 6% that we would start to get worried. 6% is kind of normal vacancy rate. So we're not there yet. And he said there's still a lot of building activity going on based on pent-up demand. So it's not, I thought the bubble might have burst. It doesn't look like that. But I think vacancy rates will certainly start to increase as shippers wear through a lot of this inventory. Why it's something we follow is when people talk about a non-existent peak season in trucking, this is part of it's a data point that sort of supports that, because people still have a lot of warehouse inventory that they're working through. And, that Home Depot news story this week where they're pushing out all their Christmas decorations early.
Told you.
Yep. Literally the day after you said that,
yeah,
I read the headline. I thought, because we said last week, well, Christmas decorations don't date. Like, so if you got last year's inventory, you could sell it this year. And of course, that's exactly what they're doing. Be the same with Halloween, maybe not back to school, but some of those seasonal events you'll see. So all that means for us buying capacity or pricing with shippers is shippers are not, buying in the same volume they did. They're worried about the high cost of storing lots of inventory. More importantly, they're worried about being caught with too much inventory. That means that truckers have hauled a lot of that freight already, and we'll still see pretty flat demand. So that was the sort of the story from the warehouse side of the industry this week. I thought it was an interesting data point, but everywhere I travel around the country in the last couple of weeks, that's a similar theme where there's lots of new warehouses that have been built that are sitting there waiting for a customer.
Dean, you remember 9 months ago, and you can go and check this. I read this article. They said over the next 5 years, they're going to need 1 billion more square feet of warehousing. I think this is the beginning of that trend that they were talking about, because all indicators mean that, e-com is going to start building up even more than what we see right now. They're going to need that extra space just in case, because of what happened, as you mentioned, with California and the expansion of inventory that they couldn't hold, and they were storing it in trailers and whatever else they could. So that's what we're seeing here.
Well, on the equipment side, sorry, Dan, we're seeing everywhere you drive, if you drive to an intermodal ramp, you see massive piles of chassis trailers. You see massive piles of empty 53-foot intermodal containers, empty. You see the same. I was driving around Sparks, and I was looking at some of the large truckload carriers who had empty 53-foot trailers parked in lots that weren't theirs, but they were vacant land where they'd parked like 100, 150 empty trailers because they weren't being used. You could tell they weren't being used the way they were stacked and the grass that was growing around the trailer wheels. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of equipment that has been ordered in the last year that is now sitting empty, which again, we kind of predicted it to happen. I think that's a normal market reaction when we get to a cycle like we're in right now. So lots of capacity, rates are still sort of falling, although at a slower rate, still lots of capacity out there. Sorry, Dan, I cut you off.
No, don't be sorry, Dean. It's interesting because I read in the Wall Street Journal last week that Amazon's actually abandoning warehouse at a rapid speed. They're reducing their warehouse space. They're actually being sued by a couple of warehouses because they're breaking contracts.
Oh.
Which is interesting because, like we said, during COVID, everybody was trying to gather warehouse space. And now that warehouses are becoming empty, I know the few shippers I speak to, they're getting rid of their third-party warehouse space as fast as they can, So they're holding inventory in their location that's more of the seasonal inventory, and all of the fast-moving inventory that they're emptying their warehouses.
Right.
So, I mean, to Jeff's point that they said they needed 5 billion more warehouse or 1 billion more square feet. I think that these companies, the ones that need it, are actually going to start getting some deals on property.
Right.
Because I know just around us, and Ryan can probably say the same thing where he lives, as you're coming down onto the 410, which is a north-south highway in Ontario, there's these huge warehouses on the left-hand side, and they were being built at a rapid pace during COVID, and they're sitting empty. There's not a single truck in sight, not a single car, nothing in sight. How long can people that own this real estate hold on to it before it's like, God, man, we got to get rid of it, right? Like it's like Home Depot. They're not going to charge full price for all those Christmas decorations. They're going to be at a massive discount.
Yeah, that happened in Cranberry, New Jersey, a few decades ago. Contractors were buying up farmland like you wouldn't believe because, grandma and grandpa gave it to mom and pop, and the children didn't want it, so they sold it off. And these are, it was like the Field of Dreams, build it and they would come kind of mindset, and they sat there, Dan, for 10 years, empty. Yeah. Like we're talking 100 and 200 door facilities. Now you see the Petcos and the larger companies that are going in there and filling them all up. So I'm just curious, over to 410, are they Prologix buildings? Well, you don't know.
No, they're not. So Prologix might buy them eventually, but they're just a builder sign out front because the builder still owns them. Right. Gotcha. So it's like Prologix has quite a few warehouses just in the Mississauga Brampton area. I've seen a couple of their signs, but no, these are like, it's literally for lease, huge for lease signs. But the signs have been up there for a year and a half now. Nothing.
Yep.
Yeah. The reason why I say that is Prologix is the largest warehouse distributor out there at 964 million square feet of facilities.
But if you look at it, so here's kind of where I'm going with it. If you look at it and you look at the companies that are reducing their outside warehouse space, will they really need 1 billion extra square feet, or will it now be absorbed in their pool of locations? I think
here's the deal on that. Yeah, here's the deal on that, and maybe Dean will agree with me. They're trying to deplete the inventory right now. How much inventory are they going to order? Because that's what's happening. They're not putting in those massive orders. That's why the peak season isn't what it's supposed to be at this time. What's going to happen when they deplete it? How much are they going to order, and where is it going to go? If you think at it like that.
Well, yeah, okay. So here's another thought process. Like if I was a shipper, or if I was a manufacturer, and I realized that I could simplify the process by not having a peak season, you know, like just consistent ordering and keep it in house, I would never order more and go to an outside source, because I think, and again, this is all based on opinion. If I was like Greg, who we have on the show quite often, who went from 0 outside square feet to 1.6 million square feet of warehouse space, right? You think about that 1.6, what that did to the logistics budget.
Yeah. Oh, blew it out of the water.
Way out of the water. I mean, you know, you're what, $2 a square foot, $3 a square foot, depending on where you are, $250. So you're like $3 million a month in extra spend. When you're looking at generating more revenue, typically logistics is one of the first departments that get hit on. We all know that. You're going to look at your outside warehouse space and say, not a freaking chance. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. And what does that do to streamlining their supply chains?
Right.
You know, getting better at ordering, getting more consistent. You know what I mean? Like there's all these processes, I think, over the last couple of years, shippers have put in place. I actually would go so far as to say there's probably not going to be a warehouse boom, because everybody, like, why would they the amount of money that was spent on warehousing over the last 3 years, I think a lot of manufacturers are like, this is ruining our profitability. I really do.
So a drawdown, right? It's that drawdown. But to what Dean was saying, I mean, there's still explosive activity on warehouses being built. So, you know, I don't think that's the case. I think that somebody knows something that we don't know, and that those facilities eventually are going to get filled within the next 5 years. Because you think about it, the excess inventory that they didn't sell, that they held, and now they're having fire sales and trying to get rid of it and at huge discounts. They're making that space for new products coming in, you know, new designs, all different things. Because just think about the 2022 and even 2021 that didn't sell, that had those years marked on their inventory, you know, whether it was a shirt or something that said 2022 or Halloween 2022 or whatever. That stuff's got to get destroyed, or they're going to take those emblems off or and sell them for dirt cheap. We need to make this room for sure.
So one of the things that, so remember, this is sort of a small data points, one person driving around in a rental car. But if you do it often enough, right, you get a picture, right? So people say, well, that's only Dean Croke's opinion. Well, if you do this stuff long enough, you start to see what happens. What I did notice on these 5 empty big warehouses was there was a handful of LTL trailers backed up to the dock. And it was FedEx, UPS, Saia. And I thought, oh, I wonder if that's where they're putting the overflow yellow freight. Right. So that was my first reaction. Now, I could be wrong, but my thought to those listening would be, hey, if you've got shippers that have got inventory issues or are looking for new locations, there's a ton of warehouse space out there that you could be using or repurposing. Because one of the questions we asked Ibrahim yesterday was, you know, are warehouses changing their fundamental design, which is sort of the segue into the Truckers Restroom Accessibility Act, Dad, but we can get to that. And he said, no, automation's, it's not he said there's labor issues. That's one of the big things they suffer from in new warehouses. Yep. But it's really not just automation. He said most warehouses are hamstrung by a ton of local regulations.
Oh, yeah.
That impact design. So it's not like you've got a national standard, because as you guys know, a lot of people don't like warehouses close to urban populations if they plonked one right next to where you live.
We got one going on right now that's you know, been in negotiations, debatable with congressmen and all that in our town here in Sparta. Where they want to take a cement factory and sell it and put in a massive, I'm talking massive warehouse next to a rail line, which makes a lot of sense. We'll take, you know, a lot of people don't understand, Dean, that, you know, when these big warehouses and companies go in there, they take a lot of their profit and they put it back into the infrastructure around the towns, rebuilding roads. Look at all the local restaurants and companies that profit from all these people that are coming in. When you have 800 new employees coming in,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. I mean, there is benefit to it.
Sure.
There
I remember
really is.
my former company, our first office was right next to the Pilgrim Pride chicken plant.
Ooh.
And we used to call it the smell of cheap rent
Yeah.
because you had to walk past the chicken plant to go to buy lunch. Like
That must have been beautiful.
Yeah,
Just
no,
before
really
you're
good.
hungry, and when you get to lunch, you're not hungry anymore.
You're not hungry anymore. Exactly.
I've hauled hanging meat out of meatworks in Australia, and I've got a decent stomach. Like I can handle a bit of that stuff, but man, walking past the chicken plant and having it waft through, like it just in a hot summer day, it was just.
That's blows out of your shoes.
But can I share another data point? This is kind of meaningless.
Yes, that's what Data Day is all about.
Because I sort of randomly pull up on the side of the road and take videos of trucks. That's what I do on my Instagram and YouTube page. So it's completely random. And I'm out on I-80 last Monday morning. It's 7 a.m. and the trucks are coming up Donna Pass on the Monday run into Sacramento and San Francisco to unload, right? So it's a good time. But it's purely random. And along comes this steel hauler with a beautiful big W900 Kenworth, pre-ELD, because I know what the engine is that he's running. So he's ELD exempt. And it's so loud, I could hear him coming. And I thought, holy crap, it's the same guy. And as he came around the corner, because I'd already seen him twice before, randomly over 4 months of being out in Truckee, or Truckee as they call it. Anyway, so last Monday week was the third time. The second time. I'm coming out of Reno to go back to Tahoe, and here he comes again, eastbound with coils on. And lo and behold, I'm sitting there on last Saturday morning, and this was yesterday. So I'm getting my date. I'm yesterday on the I-80 in Salt Lake City. I put the trunk up on the back of my rental car and sat there on the I-80, and guess who's coming along?
Here he comes.
Same guy loaded with steel, and he's the real coal roller. Right, so that means it's an old school engine, and when you put it into top gears, a big puff of black smoke comes out. There's no environmental stuff on this thing. How he gets in California, I don't know, with that old engine. There's nothing carb about that thing. Anyway, what are the chances of me pulling up randomly for 4 half-hour intervals over the course of 4 months and seeing the same truck 4 times?
That means he's on that section a lot, like back and forth all the time.
But he runs from Salt Lake City to San Francisco and back with steel. What are the chances I would see him on 4 occasions? On the 4 occasions I was
pretty
there.
Low.
So what my point is, if you sit and watch stuff often enough, you see the patterns.
Yep.
Right. And why I love watching flatbeds is that's the industrial economy on the move. That's manufacturing. I can tell a little bit about reefer and dry van freight. Like if you see a reefer trailer and the green light's not on the front of the trailer, they're not hauling reefer freight. They're hauling dry freight.
Yep.
And you can tell if it's loaded or empty. I can't tell what's in a dry van unless it's heavy or light, but flatbeds and machinery, livestock, really good indicators. So that's how I take the pulse of what's going on, and I map that to data so I can get a sense of what's moving. But you might say, well, you're only watching randomly, but I've been doing this for 23 years in this country, and you start to see the patterns. That's why I always go every airport when I get a rental car, I drive via the air freight company to see whose line haul trailers are there. You know, because truckload line haul fills in for air freight and LTL on the line haul side. All those little things build a picture. Anyway, that's sort of a segue. It's a bit like Hank the Tank story. Hank, what's his name?
Hank the Tank story.
Hank the Tank. Useless trivia.
Yeah. No, we never do useless trivia on this show. That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. So, Dean, what about the truckers' restroom bipartisan bill, accessibility bipartisan bill? That's a lot.
It's a pretty big deal, Dan. I think it's a big deal. And I asked Ibrahim yesterday, as it turns out, somewhat naively, I said, so in the design of new warehouses, has the trucker restroom accessibility bill made its way to the design of warehouses? And he said, well, not really. So one of the things that truckers suffer from right now is lack of restroom access at a shipper location.
Yep.
And in the shipper's defense, occupational health and safety regulations, sometimes you can't walk into a plant with overhead cranes without steel cap boots and hard hats. Like, there's lots of areas that are not safe. And lots of warehouses haven't been designed around people just wandering around using the restroom that aren't employees. And I know a lot of truckers haven't got time for that 2-hour induction course and the card you've got to carry in your wallet, right? So, but that said, it's one of the bigger issues truckers face, because you don't want to drive away from the shipper location to go to the restroom at the truck stop down the road to only come back and find you lost your spot. So a lot of guys have to sit there, and girls have to sit there and wait this out because they have no access to restroom facilities, to the point where some, I've written a blog post this week called "When You Got to Go, You Got to Go," and some literally, and for some people, this is a really big problem. I've had it as a truck driver when I've been waiting, on the loading docks. Is you've got no facilities. There's no food. There's no rest areas. Why it's a big deal is you spend a lot of time waiting to unload and load, especially when capacity is loose like this. One of drivers' big frustrations, but Jay Inslee signed a bill in Washington State effective July 23 that mandates shippers make restrooms available for truck drivers during regular business hours. So it passed with unanimous consent. But there is a federal bill that's being, and if I got the terminology wrong, please apology, but there is a bipartisan bill called the Truck Room Restroom Accessibility Act, going to be reintroduced. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd like to think we could get a bipartisan bill through in the current Congress. I'm not optimistic about that, but it does raise the issue about why it's hard to find and keep drivers, especially long haul drivers. Not just the waiting time, it's the lack of basic human, just needs. I mean, just think about it. If you don't drive a truck, you have the luxury in your own home of going to the bathroom and having a shower and getting dressed standing up every day. If you're a trucker, you don't have those three things. No. You're getting dressed in a small little, 8x6 box. And I'm writing a blog post for next week on how to cook on the road and save money, because you can save a couple of $100 a week by cooking your own food on the road, which is the difference between making money or not as a long haul truck driver with the waiting time is, because it's not the rate per mile you get, it's the miles per day you run,
right, and
the miles in each hour. And one of the reasons drivers leave is not just the frustration of having to wait to load and unload, it's just the fact they don't make any money. And there's a lot of inefficiency out there. So that's why it leads into this whole issue about capacity leaving the industry, and large truckload carriers finding it hard to find drivers. These are some of the systemic problems that they're facing, right? And they are systemic.
Yeah, something, and I mean, I'm just going to be honest, blunt here. It's unfortunate, Dean, but I've seen this, and I've talked to a lot of logistics managers who run warehousing, and you've got some dirty ass drivers that go there that uses the facilities and ruin it for someone who's kind of clean and everything, and they get fed up. They get fed up where they have to follow in after one of the drivers get done with it, and they destroy it. I understand they have to take showers. I understand they have to go to the bathroom, but to take a shower in a sink and mess up the whole bathroom and just have total disrespect and disregard for others is unacceptable, period, end of discussion. And that's the reason. I mean, if there were drivers out there, women and men like you, Dean, who, have respect for others, then we wouldn't have that type of issue. But there are a lot of facilities. And even if I go back to the 90s, my warehouse had facilities there. They weren't up to code, but we had bathrooms and we walked them through them and we knew them because they were consistent drivers. Right. Yeah. They always kept it clean. That's one of the major problems that needs to be addressed.
I think you're exactly right, because if I said to someone the other day, you can't have good things if you don't look after it. And they sort of said, well, but it's the shipper's problem. I said, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
Because some drivers are terrible. Just look at rest areas. Oh. Right? Just look at the plastic bags littered along the side of the road of rest areas with all sorts of human waste in them. Like there's a difference out there. So this is a little bit of trucker psychology. Professional truckers are different to drivers who are driving a truck in between other jobs. Right? There's a big difference because it's such a there's a low barrier of entry to get into truck driving. For a lot of people, I had a large truckload carrier tell me one day that trucking for them, for drivers, the drivers view trucking as their last chance in life to do something decent. So
Really?
what you end up with folks that are out there on the road that struggling, maybe mentally, financially. These, I can see how they cut corners. I get that. Because it's an incredibly hard job, especially when you're new. Yeah. But I don't think there's any excuse, though, for being, slobs, being a pig and littering our highways, because that habit extends to shipper locations.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to a dispatcher who is in charge of his drivers, and they should have meetings that, that's what it really comes down to. Guys, you have to respect each other out there. You know, you just can't go about, if you're a slob, you can't be a slob at a customer's location. You have to think about your fellow man or woman, and you have to think about how would you feel if you walked into a crappy looking a restroom like that, right? Of course, you're going to be upset. Well, think about that when you go in there and use the facilities. That's what it's all about, training.
You've always got bad apples in every single crew, like every single whatever crew, whatever you want to call it. Like every single community has bad apples, right? I mean, I agree. I've never been a shipper, but I've been in many warehouses where the drivers have to sit in a steel cage. And that's it.
And that's one of the reasons.
There's no vending machine. There's no nothing for them.
Right. That's one of the reasons they do that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
You know what? I mean, but what would stop? Okay, and again, what would stop shippers from, say, putting a porta potty outside?
Well, that's good for the first week, because then it's as nasty as that thing on the top of the Donna Pass at the summit in the heat. You're making 90 degrees
in the cold too. I mean, not really that good in the cold.
Wow! I saw this thing on a car.
Or in a porta john outside in Aurora, California, during winter months. Yeah, that's good.
Well, yeah. Well, it wouldn't be as bad as Northern Ontario outside. When you sit on it, you get frozen to it.
That's it. Anybody got hot water?
Geez, did this ever go down this shitter?
How did we get here? So how do we bring this back to selling more stuff?
So here's the thing. Your inventory can take a shit, or it can actually get out there and do some good. Right? So, looking at this and saying, okay, so we've got, obviously diesel's back on the rise. You've been paying for all this warehouse space for eons.
Right.
It's like throwing good money after bad. Right? Like, I think at a certain point, which, Home Depot expresses it massively before even back to school, they're putting Christmas decorations.
Yeah.
You usually don't see Christmas decorations till the day after Halloween.
Right.
Then they're in the store.
Yep.
I don't know. I just see companies that are saying, okay, enough's enough. Enough's enough. Like we've spent enough money. We're industry's down, blah, 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 whatever it is that they're facing.
Right.
Stop the bleeding.
Right.
I guess for the first year, you're like, okay, well, the inventory is going to sell. Just like they're at this point where they're saying, I'm not throwing good money after bad. Just whatever we get. If we get 20 cents on the dollar, so be it. Let's do it. Because I'll tell you, I wouldn't pay full price for Christmas decorations right now.
Right. No. Right. I thought Jason Miller had a really good post this week because he's tracking the quarterly credit card delinquency rate. I don't know if you guys saw that post. I thought it was really interesting that the credit card delinquency rates are getting back to pre-COVID levels, maybe a little bit higher. But his implication was, and I always go to the implication first. I'm bad. Like I read the last chapter of a book first and I've got to watch all sporting events on replay. I've got to know what this final score is so I can watch it in peace without all the anxiety of who's going to win. So Yeah, I've turned into a nutcase as I've got older, rest assured. But his implication and his post.
It's awesome.
My read of the credit
Dean,
card.
that is one of the funniest things I've heard in a long
I know, that's
time.
hilarious.
My wife thinks I'm crazy. She says, stop going to the last chapter and stop fast forwarding.
No, that's a good thing. The first page and the last chapter.
Yeah, I'm just laughing. I can't put up with the bullshit through the whole book. I'm just going to the last one to see what the result is.
Just give me the headline. I've got no more space up here for anything. Anyway, Jason Miller said, and I'll quote the great the guru from Michigan. He said, consumers will be cautious this holiday season because we've wrapped up a lot of credit card debt, as we do. Provide more evidence of a weak pre-season, et cetera, et cetera. So he did say something on our show that was interesting, and I think it was him. He said that shippers don't really, or manufacturers are not really sure where we're at, consumers in terms of demand. So there's just lots of data points that point to a flat season. I think diesel prices have gone up, 61 cents a gallon since July 4. That means the fuel surcharge has gone up for shippers 10 cents per mile. So shippers are back paying more money. They're going to be looking for more efficiencies with their logistics providers, better options. So I think there's some maybe silver linings out of this. The other point about low inventories means there'll be lots more just-in-time freight moving closer to the deadlines. You want to keep an eye on that. But I think the data point that we're all watching anxiously is how quickly carriers exit the industry at the pointy end of the spear. Because I think we talked about this a few months ago. I think both Dan and Ryan and you, Jeff, about there will be fewer trucks when this market cycle turns. And I was at a very large broker and they said, respect your capacity. They were talking to staff, respect capacity because you'll need them when the market turns. Well, we are here. We are here and the market's turning and carriers are going to exit the industry. I think the marginal carriers, unfortunately, some will have to sell their trucks at much less than what they owe, because they paid way too much during the pandemic. I feel for those carriers, but this will be a market that turns based on how quickly capacity exits. And diesel going up, diesel's gone up, 61 cents. That's pushed up my operating cost 8 cents a mile. I just ran the numbers this morning on my spreadsheet that I run. Remember, we averaged minus 0.02 cents. We averaged minus 2 cents a mile for most of 2019. August, we are averaging minus 2 cents a mile. So we've gone from +9 to -2 since June. And remember, there's no right or wrong operating cost for any truck. Even two trucks in the same fleet have different operating costs. But my benchmark of $1.88 a mile is pretty accurate. And if the national average is about 208 for dry van freight. It's getting hard, I think, for the one-way network line haul, a spot market carrier to survive. And because that capacity, if more capacity moves in the smaller part of the market, which is the spot market, that changes the dynamics in the spot market rapidly. But we're still seeing rates decrease. We're down first time under $1.60 for a long time. It's $1.59 excluding fuel. Including fuel, it's about 208 thereabouts is the national average. Capacity is barely getting by in the spot market. I couldn't say the same for contract carriers and dedicated carriers. We've got a dedicated owner-operator carrier on our show next week. Rico Mohammed's on. And it's interesting. Rico's a guy that runs dedicated freight, but he also uses our load board for spot freight on the return leg. So he's going to be able to give us a really good perspective about how he's been able to manage escalating fuel prices. So it feels, that's sort of my takeaway for anybody that's buying capacity is that there's still capacity leaving the industry, but, there's still 96% of the companies that were here last year are still here and they're doing fine. But it's the spot market capacity that's leaving that's going to move the needle.
So can I ask you guys a question? Here's part of my take on it is, you said you feel sorry for those guys that bought trucks at a higher level.
Yeah.
I start going back to, well, why did they buy trucks at a higher level? Because they wanted to get into a bear market that was generating tons of revenue for people. They heard about all this money in logistics.
Yep.
That's your bad. You went and bought a truck at that market. You don't deserve to be in this industry because we said right from the beginning of COVID, we've said it on this show 1 million times. Mm-hmm. Guys, it's that roller coaster effect. like it's going to come down. Be careful what you do. Dean, you've said put money away. If you're a carrier, take these times and put money away, because once it switches, it's going to switch quick.
And it did.
You're talking less than 60 days to go from 9 cents a mile profit to 2 cents a mile cost. Deficit. And to me, I don't know, and maybe I'm just, I don't know, maybe I'm kind of the anomaly, but after 2018-19, smarten the hell up. Like it's so again and again, right? All opinions, they're like arseholes. Everybody's got one. But here's here's what I see is 2018-19 taught us that, stay in your lane. If you're a truckload carrier, don't grow by 100 trucks in 3 months because business is good. So I think established companies were like slow growth. Slow growth is sustainable. Fast growth, you look at the Kenmores of the world back 15 years ago when Kenmore went from like 5 trucks to 120. You look at the Creekbanks of the world where Creekbank went from like 10 trucks to 300 or 250. They were out of business very quickly.
Right.
And so, you look at that kind of move, and I say all of these people that jumped in during COVID to, ride the wave of massive amounts of money probably lived like kings, and now they can't afford to withstand the drop. You don't deserve to be in the business. So get out now so we can make it profitable for everyone and everyone wins. And we're not in this predicament like we're in. Like, to me, that, and again, guys, my opinion, and it might be harsh, but I think it's brutal that we go through this all the time. And then who pays the most? The shippers. Because all of a sudden it's like costs are low and costs are high and costs are low and costs are high. And these companies, like we've talked to, that have been around for 50 plus years, all of a sudden aren't generating revenue.
Remember the earnings calls of the shippers in the back end of 2018 and then even in 2021, the common theme was they were taking hits on their earnings. They were taking a charge because of escalating transportation costs. And they missed their earnings because it doesn't take much procurement in the spot market to blow your entire budget for the year. Jeff can give me, have probably a better feel for the numbers.
And in 2019, they weren't talking about it.
Because a lot of people say,
freight rates were dirt cheap.
If the spot market's only 15% of loads moved, how do spot rates then play such a pivotal role? Because it's the overflow capacity, right? It's the filler loads. It's the capacity that builds lane density for carriers. It's when I haven't got a load for a truck and I go to the spot market. But it's when volume starts to increase and it exceeds the available capacity in the market, then it goes to the spot market. If there's no trucks, rates go up. So that's where, and it's this sort of peculiar part of the contract freight market where a carrier doesn't necessarily have to honor a contract. They can reject a load if they want.
Correct.
So this is where shippers get caught, and that's where I just remember David Jackson saying 2 months ago, there'll be fewer trucks when this market turns. Shippers beware. If you're driving rate down now, that's a pretty dangerous game to play.
Yep.
Yeah,
and it's
you're wiping out your corral of carriers. There's no loyalty. There's nothing there. And
but also when it flips, Jeff, there's been shippers that have decided to go to the spot market instead of honoring their contract rates because it's cheaper. It works both ways.
There's no loyalty. So when the market turns and you go back to your corral of carriers that you kind of let go and said, hey, okay, let's get back into business. They're going to say, first thing out of their mouth, they're going to say, well, what the hell have you done for me lately?
Yeah. Where have you been over the last year when I was suffering?
Year round, and you went and you dove to the bottom. We're not like that. We don't want to partner with somebody that's, arbitrarily going to go and take the cheapest rate and throw us to the side. No, see ya, bye.
But you know what? Then there's also the flip side of this, guys, right? Like, so example, you just talked about Rico, right? Rico's got this line haul, dedicated freight. In markets like this, Rico might lose his shirt to get back in order to run his dedicated freight, right? If he doesn't have like the contacts. So now a guy that is an awesome driver, awesome supplier, runs his owner operator company like a Fortune 500, because he's getting kind of stuck in this mix, could have some financial issues because he's losing money going back. At what point in time do you stop the bleeding?
Right.
And, you know, if we look back to 2019, which is, I think, the year we're going to have to compare to the second half of this year when it comes to numbers and rates, it's the only year that I can think of comparable when costs to operate, like fuel was high, rates were dirt cheap, everybody was, you know, you look at it and you say, you're almost cheaper to park your equipment and broker it out, right? But now you're double brokering. So it's like, it's this whole clusterfuck, if you will.
Pretty much.
And it's because people get into the industry to take advantage of the good times and then kind of disappear during the bad times. And I guess it's kind of like PPE, right? When PPE started, everybody was jumping on I'm a PPE expert. I'm like, really? What is PPE? Well, it's, you know, masks and stuff, right? Like it's they don't even understand what the acronym is, but it's kind of, I don't know. I don't see an end to this. I see this is going to be something that's going to continually be back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Because at what point are people not going to buy trucks when the industry is good?
Right.
Probably never, right?
Right. But you know what's going to happen over the next couple of months is that the small SMEs, 2 to 4 carrier kind of owner ops, they'll go by the wayside. They'll park their trucks. They'll probably go to a construction job and get paid $45 an hour just to make things, you know, make ends meet. And then the bigger companies, the bigger asset companies are going to start, you know, M&As, man. They're going to merge, more acquisitions on that, you know, and you will see the market change. But right now, it's done. I call this year out. It's done. You know, don't be worrying about this year. It's done. Focus on what you can do today and the rest of the year to put yourself in position A for 2024, second half of 2024, to be in the right place at the right time when that market switches. Because this is a long haul bear market right now that we're in, and I see nothing that's going to change it whatsoever. Remember, back July 4th, I said on this show, I said, at day 186, I think it is, this will be the turning point on whether we're going to follow the track on 2019 or we're going to see an uptick. Well, guess what happened? Precisely right down in the garbage, and there's nothing. And then I also said about Christmas, and it's funny that Dean said that. I said, when you start seeing Christmas being put out, you know, in August, that tells a whole story. That tells a whole freaking story right there.
Exactly.
Well, they're getting rid of inventory, man. They're dumping inventory. There's nothing coming in right now, and they're going to wait until all that stuff's gone, and then you're going to see a huge uptick. And that's where you want to be when that happens.
I would have thought, you know, especially when it comes to Christmas, they would have dumped it in January and February.
Or like, puts a whole new term to Christmas in July. What they have here. Almost. I mean, seriously.
Right.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, that was a great conversation. Ryan disappeared on us. I don't know where he went. I think he got a phone call. But thanks for joining us. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he had a tea time. Until next week, my friends, welcome.
Have a good week.
What the hell was that?